All right, hopefully today is the last day of framing in the roof. It's Monday. I went this morning, and it took me a minute to make my trip this morning because we finally had a thunderstorm roll through, dropped about 6/10. 3/4 to an inch would have been better, but I'll take the 6/10. I'm not gonna complain about it. Water's water, right? So drove up to Dowagiac this morning. If anybody's looking for some cheap custom rolled steel, Midway Engineering up there, I get Dad said like back in the 70s and 80s, like they were the pole barn supplier in this area. And they still got a pretty nice facility. I mean, they're pretty nice setup up there. But they had some tin that was really close to this, but it was made for like interior decorative wall covering. It wasn't very heavy, and he said it could be used for what I was doing, but he wouldn't recommend it just for long-term reliability and strength, which was kind of what I was finding even online, finding tin like that. That's kind of what I was finding, is most stuff that's rolled like or corrugated like that is more like decorative. It's not really meant for structural weather covering like that. So I ended up going with a standard pole barn steel, custom rolled galvanized, and luckily they had a roll of galvanized up there that was, the galvanizing was, I'm not going to say damaged. It wasn't damaged. Like, the galvanizing's fine. It's not going to rust or anything, at least anytime soon. 50 years down the road maybe, but the galvanizing didn't come out right, and it's got streaks and blotches and stuff in it, and you had it sitting right next to a roll of good galvanized. He's like, I'll make you a deal on this if you let us roll it out of there. And it kind of gives a weathered, it almost looks kind of like this. It's got some streaks and some imperfections in the pattern, and so he's rolling it out of that. He cut almost 50 cents a foot off of it price. He's gonna roll the trim, the steel. I'm putting a ridge vent in it, soffit, or not. I'm not doing soffit. The fascia, the drip edge, the whole thing's getting rolled out of that tin, so it'll all match and it'll all look kind of aged. It won't be super duper shiny. So I think it'll work out, and everything is going to cost like, I think it was like $520 something versus almost $600 just for steel if I was going to go the corrugated route. So as much as I'd like to get steel or put steel like that back on it so that it matches and it looks like I haven't done anything to it, it's just not cost effective. So anyhow, did that this morning, got back. By that time the weather flipped around and now it's just hot and muggy again, but at least it's not storming. So I've been working on laying out trusses, and I figured that before I finish that up I would show you what I was doing. This side is already done. I had to sit down and draw it out and figure out where everything, I'm figuring it's not quite gonna be an 8-foot truss by the time I put the kicker and everything on to extend it out. The fascia board doubles as my last purlin, and I'm figuring on roughly 1.5 inches of steel overhang. The guy that was helping me with the steel said they usually recommend between 1 and 2 inches of overhang on the steel. He said any more than that and snow load can bend it. So I'm figuring on 1.5 inches, leaving a 1 inch, pulling the steel back 1 inch both sides, so a 2-inch gap across the top total for ventilation under the ridge vent. For a building this size, that should be plenty adequate. And if I want to hang it a little bit more, I can go with a full 2 inches of overhang down here, or however it works out. I'm trying to make it where I got some room to adjust depending on how it looks once we actually get the steel here. The purlins, the first one because the ridge vent screws to the first purlin, at least the way they do it. There's a couple different ways they do ridge vents. Some of them screw to the tin, some of them are fastenerless. but this one screws through the tin and then into the first purlin. So I'm 6 inches. The first purlin is 6 inches on center, standing on end. So instead of laying the purlins flat, I'm standing them on end to take some of the bounce off out of the roof and add some strength to it. And it makes it easier to fill in the gap here, because I can just stand 2x4s on end and go in between and fill in my soffit. So but like I say, I've already got this side done. The trusses, or the purlins, the first one's down 4 1/4 off of the ridge to put it 6 inches on center once it's standing up. And I had to do some figure. I nailed or screwed a 2x4 standing up with the edge on the center and measured it all out and made sure we were good there. So it's a true 6 inch on center once it's standing up. And then they're 30, and it didn't come out to an even fraction, so I decided on 30 and 3/16 spaced, and then that'll put my center of my fascia board / last purlin will be on center just about right. So this side's all laid out, and I figured I'd show you how I was doing it. I got my lines laid out on this end and on that end, and then I'm shooting a chalk line across. Obviously I don't have anybody down here to hold the chalk line on this end, so I just took some small nails and drove them in at an angle centered on my lines. And then we can take the chalk line and since the nails are drove in at an angle, the harder you pull on it, the more the hook's going to try to go down towards the rafter and stay on center. And then we can go, I'll just leave you here. And then that gives you a line to make sure your purlin stays straight going down the rafters. Trying to figure out how to do this with one set of hands is, it's not terrible, but I remember when I was a little kid, I used to love snapping the chalk line. That was a big deal when Dad was doing projects and he got the chalk line all set up and he let you snap it. I don't know what it was about being a little kid and snapping a chalk line, but it just fascinated me. So I'm going to finish laying these lines out, and then once I snap them with the chalk line, just to make sure I don't lose the lines, I'll take a speed square and go through and mark them with a pencil once I know where they're going to be, just to make sure everything's good. So let me finish this up and get my purlins marked up so I know where to get the holes drilled, because I pre-drill the holes. And then these are the screws that are attaching them. So you pre-drill, and then the shank goes through the 2x4, and then the threads bite into the rafter, and that way it cinches the 2x4 down tight, and you end up like that. So you got to lay out the holes and it makes it easier to pre-drill them, so A, you don't split the wood, and B, the bit or the screw doesn't try to walk or anything. So let me get that stuff ready to go, and then we'll start setting purlins. Okay, I'm ready to start setting purlins. My hopes were that everything's gonna be close enough I could just go through and pre-drill everything. Yeah, that's not the case. I went through and measured I mean, it's close. I've really only got that dimension. I went through and marked everything. This and that are off by an 1/8 as far as truss spacing. That one, those are the same. And then that and that are off by an 1/8. So, I mean, it's pretty darn close, but not close enough that I'm willing to risk pre-drilling everything. I keep trying to apply machining levels of precision to structural framing, and that's just not how that works. So we're going to, I have the same kind of concept as I did with the chalk line. Since I'm only me, myself, and I got nails on the lower line for the purlins to hold it up there while I do my thing, and then I can just pop the nails out, scoot down, do the next one, and so on and so forth. So you try making it perfect, and that's just, you probably could have managed it if you were starting from scratch, but between not starting from scratch, working with modern wood that is just atrociously warped and bent and just doesn't work out like you think it should. There's only so much you can do. I got a 4.5-inch overhang, so that by the time you put the fly rafter on, that gives the 6-inch overhang, which I think the overhang is going to make this look a lot nicer than it did before, just being wall. Scoot down and do the other side. That way everything's all nice and straight across. See, that's a bow in the board. That's not. This is the worst one. Naturally, apparently I picked the worst one for first, but 16-foot long lumber, it's just atrocious. Hell, 8-foot long lumber, if you can get something without a bow in it, is a small miracle anymore. That being said, this batch of lumber I got for this, you had to do a surprisingly little amount of picking through the bunk to get decent lumber. It was kind of scary. I suppose I could probably try to set you up here so you can actually see what's going on, huh? Just don't fall. It's going to hurt you more than it would hurt me. That was my guy for the wrong tool. The guy that was straightening the roll out for the crimper. Said it was done Friday. They forgot to call. Asked him what I owed him, and he said a box of donuts. Said it's going to take more time to set up an account to take money from you than it's worth. So just come get it, bring us food. That's good enough. I was like, okay. I said, I mean, it's not like a mom and pop shop. They like a legit, like really nice full-on factory setup. They had to pull somebody off of a job in the whole 9 yards. I didn't expect them to do it for free, but there are still people out there that just like helping people out. So I'll go down and get that first thing in the morning. I want to get this finished up before I go pull off of this and go to that. But hopefully if my steel's done tomorrow, we can get this buttoned up. I'd like to say tomorrow afternoon, but at the rate I'm going on this, it's probably going to be Wednesday before I finish up. So I'm probably going to need, definitely going to need Dad's help on the steel, because that is, A, it's going to be a two-man job to get it up here and make it nice, and B, you're getting way out of my field with that. Pretty darn close to 6 inches. So now, obviously, it's going to take a little bit of work because we're not lined up there. Not too bad right there, but you're going to have to do some pushing and tugging and get everything lined up, and just go down the and do them. I got 6 to do like this, and then we'll put the kickers on for the eave and go from there. All right, purlins are on. Now I gotta make kickers to bring my eaves out all the way. See if I can still manage to hook a tape measure. And what we're going to do is make them long. Leave them, don't cut the miter yet, leave them long, get them all on, snap a chalk line across the end, that way they're all even, and then cut the miter while they're on the barn. So I'm shooting for 90. It's going to be 97 to the edge of the tin, and I was shooting for 95 and a quarter, or no, it's 94, so I was shooting for 95 and a half once the once the fascia board's on. So I need 94 inches, and we are at 65 and a half. And hold on, let me do this real quick. This is hard one-handed. Okay, so I need 8 kickers, 30 and a half inches long. And that'll get me like 4 inches, 5 inches of tail to cut off to get my final dimension. Okay, I got all the kickers cut, all the holes are pre-drilled. It was easy to do on these. So Unfortunately, because there's a screw here, I can't nail through. Well, I suppose if I really wanted to, I could take a couple and come in at an angle. It'd probably work. But anyhow, cross that bridge when we get to it. Alright, I got all the kickers on. All my dimensions are marked. This will get me to 95.5 once 95.5 to the outer edge once the fascia board's on. So that's where we're shooting for. So now that I'm marked, I can just take the skill saw and buzz them off. Doing it this way ensures that as long as you do a decent job of cutting, they're all in line, makes giving any variation. Because yeah, I did the same thing I did on the purlins. I marked this one and the one down in the end and snapped a chalk line to do the two in the center. That way they're even. Which actually, doing all the measuring, I'm pretty darn lengths and everything else, I'm really not doing too bad, at least the part that I've built. The part I'm building on top of, not so much. Okay, I got my fascia boards on. The last thing I got to do, at least for structure, is put my fly rafters on, which that's just going to be a matter of, I can do all my miter cuts up here because they're going to be the same, just up higher, and then I can get them fastened down there temporary, get them laying in, scribe my lines for my cuts down here, and go from there. These things were interesting to get on by myself, but I was able to set this side on a ladder and use screws to get that side on, then come down, screw this side, and then I had to loosen them, loosen one side at a time and let everything relax, because these don't actually measure out exactly 4.5. But if I lay a 2x6 on end up all the purlins and my fascia board, they line up, so I'm going to go with what lines up, not what measures out. I'm sure that these stringers are a little wonky or whatever because they're not cut straight, and I miter cut the fascia board so that it can go all the way up and give me a little more ground clearance here, and I think it looks nicer than letting it hang down and having a gap there. But my cordless skill saw did not appreciate making that cut 12 foot, 12 or 13 foot long, however it ends up being. Did not like it. But it did it. It didn't like it. So let me get my miter cuts done on the last 2x6s I need, and with any luck I will be done framing this up here this evening. Well, we're not quite done. Was close to coming, or close to being done. Could not pull it off with this equipment. Got the first fly rafter up there, and it's about 1.5 inches. It ends up right about here. So there's this much of the fascia board still hanging out. So I gotta go get 10 more, or not 10 more, 4 more 10-foot 2x6s instead of 8s like I had, because that's not long enough, obviously. The only other option would have been, and I put these on with ring shank, so it was not a good option. She ain't gonna get it apart, but would have been to knock this off and cut like 2 inches back here, but then you lose, don't really want to lose any more overhang than what I've already, what I can't remember. I think this is a little bit over a 12-inch overhang, because you want everything clear of the foundation since there's not going to be gutters on it. I don't know if I'm going to put gutters on it eventually or not. Probably not, just because of what it is and the amount of water they're just going to see off that roof, but maybe. So yeah, everything's ready to rock and roll, except for I got to go get more timber. The 2x6s I had cut, naturally I mitered all 4 of them already, so, but that's okay, because I think what we're going to do, because I'm going to have one hellacious hole right here for ventilation, probably an excessive amount of ventilation. So what I'm probably going to do, and I don't know, between that 10-foot or 12-foot or whatever that 2x6 is sitting there, actually it's got to be closer to, well, it started out as a 16, I accidentally, anyway, I got plenty there, and then I got plenty between the 4 2x6s I got. Probably going to take a 2x6 and stand it on end in here, flush. I'm not going to miter it, but we'll like put the corner flush here, that, and have it standing with a gap here, for 2 reasons. A, that'll close up that gap, because you do not need, I mean, you're looking at what, probably 8 inches of hole there, because I'm not putting soffit on it, because I want to, it didn't have soffit on it originally. I don't want to put soffit on it now. I want to leave it open to keep the look. Plus that was just one more way to spare an expense. But that'll give me about 1.5 inch-ish gap here. That'll be real easy to put probably like screen door screen or something over, so to keep the critters out and still allow ventilation. You're gonna have the ridge vent up there, and I'm half tempted to make something decorative or something or other to leave those little triangles on both ends open for ventilation, and between the 1.5 inch gap along the ridge, or along the top plate and the ridge vent, and if I leave the vent, or if I leave the peaks open, for the amount of birds that we could have in here, I gotta believe that would be a very adequate amount of ventilation. So anyhow, I gotta finish getting stuff cleaned up here. Well, I'm all cleaned up. I just gotta put the garden tractor and the tools away. That's been handy as hell. Don't have to drag your tools back and forth between the shed every time. You just throw them all in the trailer, go park it, and then the next morning you pull everything back out and it's all in the trailer ready to go. So I gotta get that put away, get hooked onto the trailer. We gotta go to Lowe's. So, and I guess since I'm going to the store, I'll get my donuts for my payment for services rendered on straightening out that crimper roller. So, and I need to get another box of nails because I ran out of 16-penny ring shanks, and I went to the hardware store in town and they didn't have any They had 4s and 5s, but that was going to be way too dang long. I want 3.5s. It is a pain to find ring shank nails. Even Lowe's is eh. So, and I gotta look and see what their post-setting foam is. Actually, before I buy that, we need to get the rolls home, measure them out, figure out the volume, and then I'll know how many bags I need. Because the way they made it sound, a bag makes 0.7 cubic feet. But anyway, different project down the road. We'll finish framing this up in the morning, weather permitting. I think we got some chances of rain coming through, which if it's raining, more power to it. We could use more rain. So we'll catch you guys hopefully at some point tomorrow, weather permitting, to finish framing this. And then the steel will be on another video, just to keep things somewhat not forever long. All right, I went and got 2x10s yet last night. That's all taken care of. I went and got my crimper roll this morning, took them guys some donuts. That's all taken care of. So anyhow, putting the fly rafters on right now. I already got my first one up there to figure out my system, so working on the second one now. So yeah. Except I need my screw gun over here, that would help. Part's a little interesting trying to fly solo, but Phillips drive screws need to be outlawed. They're worthless. For the fact that I already had a 5-pound box, I wouldn't even be using them. Okay, now I can mark my corners up, saw them off, nail those two on, and do the other side. All right, fly rafters are all on. Corners are all mitered off. I just, like I say, I just cut them right there on the building. It was easier. When with two people, it probably would have been manageable to put them up there, measure everything out, take them back off, cut them, put it. But it was just with one person. That's just a lot of fuss. And once I got them on there, I made two more little cross ties to put on there, just to give that ridge a little bit more strength, although it really didn't need it because you got your two purlins right there. But put a little bit more strength in it, and it just gives another little dimension there to that corner, and it dresses it up a little bit. So yeah, it'd be nice if I knew somebody with a scroll saw, which I don't. But it'd be nice if I did have somebody make me up one of those fancy little scroll work designs that they used to put in the peaks of buildings and stuff back when architecture had some flair to it. But those cross ties will do the job, and they're somewhat structural-ish. Like I say, they're not doing a whole lot, but they make me feel better. So now the last two things I gotta do is I'm gonna put 2x4s in between the purlins up both ends, just to close in that gap, because we don't want it there since I'm not doing soffit. And then get those in and get the 2x6s put in here to close this gap up, and then have to see how much room that leaves me to work as to whether or not I go get screen and fill these in before we start putting tin on, or if I put the tin on and worry about that later. It's all going to depend on how much room I've got to work with once the tin's on. To determine how easy, yeah. So anyhow, and since the 2x4s there are just going to be filling a gap, they're not structural, I'm not going to bother putting the heavy screws in. I'll just toe nail them, and that'll be plenty, because they just, like I say, they just have to exist there. They don't really have to do anything. So on to that. Okay, I think we're finally done. I think it's ready for 10. I'm pretty sure. I got all of the 2x4s put in for spacers, just to cover the E-vent here. Well, it's not really an E-vent. And up on top, I had to make a little dealio to fill the peak gap in. And then I got all these put in. I apologize, I was gonna video putting one in, and then I got to the last one and I was driving the last nail, and it was like shit. So, but this I think is gonna work out good. It's gonna give me, since I'm not putting any soffit in, it's gonna give me a spot to lay the that foam stuff that goes under the tin to seal the end up so the critters can't get in, so I could put that on these. because it's not going to do any good putting it down there on the fascia board, because you got this hole here, and there's going to be holes here from the ribs in the tin. And then it's also going to work out because, where did I put my board? Right there. It just so happened that this board was the exact right spacer for setting those in there and getting them lined up with the top of the rafter boards. But while I was putting the first one in, it's like, huh, if we need to close these things up in the winter to hold in more heat and cut the draft down, obviously this one's too short, and even if I have to get some 2x4s and rip them to the right dimension, but cut some boards that'll fill that hole in, put a couple grab handles on them, and then there'll be a screen on the outside, and put some sort of little something to hook them in or whatever so that the wind can't blow them back out. But put some handles on there and make it where those things can go in there and fill that gap in the winter if we find that it gets too cold or it's too drafty in here. So I think that'll end up working out pretty good. It'll be multifunctional. So anyhow, somebody that knew what they were doing probably could have had that done in a day, and it took me, well, a day and 2 afternoons, because yesterday I burned up the morning ordering, going up to that tin, or that barn supplier, and ordering tin. And then what did I do Sunday morning? I did something Sunday morning and didn't get out here till after lunch. Either way, somebody knew what they were doing, could have done it a whole lot faster. And of course I had, since I was doing stuff by myself, there were several pieces that I had to sit down and figure out how am I going to hold this stuff up there by myself to put everything together. So there was time doing that, but plus tear down time to get the old roof off. But it was fun. Learned a lot. It looks good. It looks really good. I'm really proud of that. That looks pretty darn good. I think there's probably more wood in that whole roof now than there was in the entire structure when I started. It's definitely stronger. That it don't budge 1 inch. That old roof was, especially once I got the first side of tin off, that old roof was spongy. I was scared to get up there and pull this side off without falling through. So, but anyhow, and naturally had to have, I'm not going to say it was a bad comment, but it's definitely a person showing their ignorance. Said where they're from, it was just fine the way it was before I started this, and I could have bought a lot of chicken and eggs for what I'm having in there, and I don't know where he's from. I don't know. I replied that I hate to be livestock where he's from, because yeah, the way it was, you could have thrown some chickens in there and the roof would have leaked on them and it would have been drafty and the roof was sagging, and the minute you started putting animals in there and started using it again, it would probably would have deteriorated even faster because of the shape that it was in. But you could have done it, and then you would have been fighting it, and no, it was not fine the way it was. It needed to be repaired. And if you're going to repair it, you might as well make it better. That way you don't got to do it again. And the crappy part is, there's nothing on this, there's nothing that I've done here that could have been completely prevented had they actually taken the time to take care of it even after they got done with the hogs. And it wouldn't have taken much. Slap some bin paint on it to keep the tin from rusting out, keep all the trees cut back, because that's what killed the roof, was the trees knocking the tin around and stuff. Because like I say, when I first bought this place, I didn't know this shed was here. The trees were growing clear out to basically in line with that telephone pole. It was completely covered. That's what killed this thing, was being covered up in trees. All these old farm structures, even old houses and stuff, people don't understand that what kills them is lack of being able to dry out. That's what killed the roof on my house. When I bought the house, there was a bunch of trees all grown up around it to the point where they were touching the roof and stuff. That's what killed the roof on the house. Everything that I've done here could have been completely prevented, that the horse stable, that could have been, if it just would have been a little bit of maintenance. The big barn, it's amazing that it's in the condition that it's in, given the state of everything. That's probably the best structure on the property. The corn crib, it's okay, but it could have been better. Like it just needed a little bit of preventative maintenance and a little bit of love and care, and everything would have survived just fine. But no. But back to the subject of, it was fine the way it was, and it wasn't. I mean, like I say, you could have thrown chickens in there, but this all comes back to what we've talked about in the past as far as stewardship of the land. Now, granted, animals aren't land, but they're still part of nature, and it all comes back to the stewardship of nature. Farm animals are kept and maintained for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is food production for humans. Their life is short, their life is boring, but it's our responsibility as farmers to make sure that even though their life is short, they have the best possible life that they can have while they're here, because A, the animals are more comfortable and more productive. They live a healthier life. When they're more comfortable and more productive, they're lower maintenance. And then not only that, but if you have a decent structure and good facilities to keep them in, it makes our job easier. So I don't know why anybody, it's like you're going around, driving around the country, and you drive past an old farmstead and you see, like, perfect examples like cows out in a cow lot, and the shed that they stay in is half fallen down and half the tin's falling off of it. There's no grass, it's just pure mud. They got hay that's not in a feeder, it's sitting down in the dirt. The cows look like hell. If you're going to keep animals like that, you don't deserve to have animals. I mean, I get it in the wintertime and stuff, like cow lots, they get muddy, that's just the nature of the game. But like year round and stuff, there's absolutely no reason to keep animals like that. And I get it. Facilities are, it's especially older ones, if they have fallen behind on maintenance, takes a lot of money, case in point, to get back to a condition where they're usable. But for the most part, this is going to be a one-time expense. Other than possibly doing some tin work and stuff on it in the future, I should never have to touch this barn again as long as I live, as long as I keep up on the maintenance. It's not that hard. And like I say, it makes life easier because it's set up to do what it's supposed to do now. The animals are going to be the animals are going to be more comfortable, easier to take care of. It was not fine the way it was. That's why we're putting a new roof on it. That's why we're putting windows in it. That's why we're putting doors in it. It's just, I don't get that mentality of they're just farm animals. They don't need, I mean, yes, they're chickens. I don't like chickens. Shelly wants chickens. We're going to have chickens. But if I'm going to have chickens, they're going to be taken care of to the best of my ability in the best facilities that I can manage right now. And this is going to be my attempt at that. So no, it was not fine the way it was. And yes, it's a lot of money, but it's going to be money well spent in the long run. So take your opinion and you know what to do with it. And if that's your opinion on how to keep animals, do everybody a favor and do not get livestock, because you are not going to be good at it. Okay, there's my rant for today. So, with all that being said and out of the way, and now that I just keep looking at it like, man, I built that. I am very proud of this. It just looks stout. I like it. The roof is stronger than the barn it's sitting on now. And the kicker of it is, I'm probably going to have more just in putting the roof on this than they probably had in the tin, the wood, the foundation, the concrete, the whole 9 yards when they built the barn originally. But such is the times we live in. So anyhow, I'm going to get stuff cleaned up here. And what time is it? My barn tin was supposed to be done about 2 o'clock. It's about 3 o'clock now, so I can get cleaned up, or I can get stuff cleaned up, hook onto the trailer, go get the tin, and hopefully, I would say hopefully tomorrow we can get it all tinned. But I'm not gonna set that kind of goal where we're gonna get done what we can get done. So yeah. With that being said, that's it for this one, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.